So this is Your Game Sucks. This is a talk I've been giving for a number of years to a bunch of different conventions about playstyles. And the idea of this is an examination of playstyles that happen in cooperative games specifically. And so as a result of this, Your Game Sucks has kind of become a shorthand for my overall LARP playstyle model, which I tweak and modify every once in a while. So like I had different years, different models. This is the most current version. I actually gave this version of the talk at SPSU a couple months ago. And the whole point of this is to use playstyle models and game theory to analyze how you're having fun and how you can help other people have fun. Because especially in a live action environment and other cooperative style games, the players are doing just as much to add to the experience as game masters or storytellers are. So if the players understand how they're having fun, that will help to help other people have fun. So before we go into that, about me, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Eddy Webb. I'm a game designer, no longer working at TCP, but I have been a game designer and writer for a number of years. I've worked on over 100 books, including Mind's Eye Theater, The Awakening, which is the live action version of Mage the Awakening, and also for Vampire the Masquerade. And I have been working more explicitly on this kind of LARP theory and analysis for 7 years now. Before I go into this too deeply, I do want to give some disclaimers. First, the object of this is to get the most amount of people to have the most amount of fun. Not all of this is going to apply to everybody. It's not meant to be one size fits all. We're all unique and creative individuals, so we're all going to have our own perspectives, and that's okay. But the idea of this is that if we get the most people in your game having the most amount of fun, I consider that to be a win. These are also my personal theories. And people have disagreed in the past, and they're welcome to it. The only thing that makes my theories quote-unquote better than everybody else's is I'm a huge nerd that gets paid to think about this stuff, as opposed to doing it in my free time. And if I didn't get paid for it, I'd still do it in my free time anyway. So this is just my theories, and I'm always revising and updating my own theories. So they're not meant to be handed down from the mountain or carved into stone. This is biased towards salon LARPs, for those of you who know the different nuances of LARPs. Salon LARPs, in this case, I'm talking about things like Vampire the Masquerade LARPs. So everyone's dressing up in costume, they're generally in a room. Most of the LARP is through conversation and through costuming rather than through weapons like Boffer LARP, and it's not as deeply immersive as Nordic style LARP. So my experience starts slanted towards that style. And also I swear a bit. It's pretty patient. If there was a problem with that, let me know, and you'll be able to.
My dad's an engineer, you can't defend me.
I'm not ready. I think it'll be fine.
We inadvertently swear during the game shows. I mean, it's just become a thing.
No, excellent. Well, this was explicitly labeled as 18+, so I just want to make you aware that I kind of fucking swear. I was pretty much what's come before. When I looked into developing my own LARP theories, I looked at existing playstyle models. There actually are a lot of those around. Game designers have over the years tried to analyze why people are having fun so that they can make games better and make them maximize the amount of fun. And certainly as video game designs have increased in popularity and in budgets, that kind of exploration has also increased, especially over the past 10, 15 years. I'm only going to go into 4 of those that I think are most relevant, and that's going to cover a spectrum of tabletop RPG design, computer online games, and also live action. And I would caveat, I don't always agree with a lot of these models. Some of them I disagree with on a philosophical level, some of them I don't necessarily have an opinion on. But they are relevant because they're either noteworthy for something they bring to the table, or there are well-known models if you get into game design. The first one is the D&D survey. This was done by Wizards of the Coast in 1999. And this was done as they were in the process of developing 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. It has almost no impact on game design since D&D 30 was done, but it is noteworthy for being the first large-scale analysis of tabletop role-playing games that I could find. And they came up with a number of different categories of what they consider to be playstyle models for Dungeons & Dragons. And they have the thinker, and the thinker is the person who actually likes to solve puzzles and actually considers the game design as a whole to be a kind of puzzle, so they end up being min-maxers. The power gamers, these are players who actually enjoy really intense experiences. They really want everything to be amped up and very epic, and they're not as worried about the storyline implications of the actions they take during the course of the game. There's the character actor, which is the player who enjoys expressing his character, and may make suboptimal choices from a system perspective in order to really indulge in the kinds of experiences he wants to portray. And then finally, there's the game master, someone who enjoys the narrative, the overall resulting story that comes from the game, and looks for non-rules answers to inconsistencies. So if something doesn't quite make sense in how the rules plan out, thus you find an in-game or an in-world narrative to explain away this contradiction. Second model is called the big model. It was previously called GNS theory, and this was created by Ron Edwards, who's very popular in the indie game design. And he has three, we call creative agendas that relates to elements of exploration. And the elements of exploration are things like character and setting and the system and the color or the nuance of the system and the situations the players are in. All the different aspects of a game are lumped into what he calls these elements of exploration, and how people approach these elements of exploration are the three different creative agendas. And the first one is simulationism. Simulationism is the idea that these elements of exploration are things unto themselves to enjoy. I enjoy playing this game because I like the background. I enjoy playing this game because I really enjoy how the system flows. So I'm really focused on the game itself being the point of my experience. There's gamism, where you use the elements of exploration as an arena to test yourself against other players. So I really enjoy showing how my understanding of the rules is superior to somebody else's understanding of the rules, or how my mastery and knowledge of the deep setting is better than somebody else's knowledge of the deep setting. And finally, there's narrativism, where these elements of exploration are used to create a story addressing a premise. So they get bent and twisted and moved around, but these collective elements present an overall premise that they want to address. So Dungeons & Dragons has this idea of being this epic fantasy world in which you combat monsters. How you actually go about doing that is secondary to addressing that kind of core premise. Third model is called Bartle test. The Bartle test was created by Dr. Richard Bartle, and he did a 1996 study of MUD players, which are multi-user online dungeon players, a precursor to what we now call MMOs. There's been many expansions and refutations of this model over the years. Bartle himself has put out an 8-form, a 16-form, and now a 64-form model. I'm not going to go into all of those. I'm going to go into his core 96 version, which is the easiest to kind of address. And he has 4 key, what we call suits of MUD players. The first one is the achievers. Raising levels is the main goal. I want to continue to show forward progress on a mechanical level. Second is explorers, which he defines as a player who enjoys exposing the game's inner mechanisms. They like to dig into how the game works and seeing how it plays and what it actually does when you poke around the corners of the game system. Socializers, people who actually log into the game primarily to talk to other players and not necessarily to engage with the game system itself. They were using as kind of a modified chat room in a lot of respects. And finally, killers, those that impose themselves on others. And this is a slightly misnomer because killers can also be people who would force their superior knowledge of the game on others. So learn to play noob kind of stuff.
Briefers?
Not necessarily. Killers are people that really enjoy imposing themselves, but not always to the detriment. They saw themselves as, if I kill you, or if I tell you how to play, you'll be a better player, and therefore give me a challenge. So they weren't doing it necessarily to be cruel, although certainly the line is pretty blurry. I will go into that case a little bit later. And finally, fourth one is not quite a model, but certainly it was a way to kind of compartmentalize and address these elements. And these are called venue style sheets. This was something I created from the Cameroon Fan Club, which is a large-scale live-action organization. And what they did is, part of the idea of the Cameroon style game is that people can take their characters between cities and between countries in one kind of large grouping of games. So they had to come up with a template to be able to tell a player from Atlanta who's going to New York what kind of game they can expect when they go to New York before they buy tickets and go out there and get on a plane. It's been used extremely consistently by that organization, but it's the first time that I saw any attempt to try to put actual data and even numbers behind different elements of gameplay. And they had 8 different ones, and a lot of these you'll see are very similar to other models addressed in certainly action, intrigue, but they also added elements like darkness or drama. which are a little more unique to live action settings and actually are subdivisions of some of the other categories. So this is less of a playstyle model and more of a way of showing the aggregate of playstyles in a way that you can shoot outcomers. So it doesn't quite address what I was looking for, but it's the first kind of nascent steps towards them. So I went through all of those, did my own thinking, my own experiences, and over time I've come up with 4 actual playstyle archetypes. So 4 categories of players that I've found through live action games. And the first thing is that this is not meant to be a personality test. You don't answer a bunch of questions and it goes, you're now this archetype. It's really meant to be an analytical tool, and what that really means is that players can and will fall into multiple categories. Certainly I examined my own playstyles, and over the years I have certainly gone through not only all of these categories through the course of my career and through the course of my gaming hobby, but also I've found sometimes go through these categories within the course of a few months or even sometimes in a game session. So people are complex and how they have fun is complex. The fact that we've not been able to easily articulate it as designers shows that this is a difficult and complicated process, and part of that is because people have fun in different ways at different times. But this does help to kind of give trends rather than forcing people into critical groups. So if you can use these kind of templates to understand the trend of what's going on and the trend of how you have fun, how other players have fun, then you can use that as an analytical tool to make some decisions about how to best improve your game and to help improve the game of others. So the first category are actors. Actors, they have fun through portraying a particular character. What they really enjoy is they develop a character and then they try to embody that character to the best of their ability. They're not as worried about what's going on outside of them. They really want to kind of maximize that character-driven roleplay. So for them, that's the most important element of their fun, is that character-driven roleplay. As a result, they can find out of game and out of character intrusions to be disruptive because they're so focused on trying to be in that mindset or to embody that character that if someone asks them, something outside the game, they get jarred from that because it's the antithesis of what they're really enjoying. They can also become attached to what's called their personal story. They're not as worried about what other players are having fun with. Sometimes they can be kind of myopic and drawn into my character's goals, dreams, and aspirations are going in a certain direction, and I want to focus and fulfill those. This is kind of similar to the big model simulationism. Again, the character is also an arena of exploration, as well as the D&D character actor. But there's a number of models that kind of address some form of the quote-unquote hardcore role player, someone who actually is really focused on role-playing a particular character. Second are what we call cultivators. Cultivators, their main way of having fun is to improve a character, usually on a mechanical level, and then demonstrates that improvement and that mastery of the character. So as a result, mechanical development is actually the most important aspect of cultivators. The downside, naturally, is that because they're so focused on the improvement of and development of that mechanical superiority, sometimes that they focus on that to detriment. They drop out of character. They focus more on, well, my mechanics allow me to do certain things. I want to be able to go right to those elements and those arenas that I've opened up through my mastery and through my improvement. And then they consider those interactions that bypass mechanics to be unfair because their expertise and their involvement has been disregarded. This is very similar to big model gamism. We really players to kind of show how they can compete in the arena of exploration, and also the D&D power gamer. But again, most models have some form of that kind of mechanical exploration. Third are fixers. Fixers are people who really like to find and solve problems. Usually these are problems inside the game. Sometimes it drifts out of it, but really the idea is that they have to go into a game and find out what the plot is, what the thing that's going on is, and deal with it. So really it's about engaging challenges. So challenges don't have to be mechanical, they can be role play, but if their mechanical superiority has been established and if their character's been established, there's nothing going on, they get bored because they need to have those challenges to engage them. So they find those kinds of stories that don't have challenges boring, or vice versa, they may create challenges. Because in their minds, challenges are fun, I'm not having fun, other people may not be having fun, so I'll make problems for them to solve. Vice versa, paradoxically, if the challenges are too powerful, they may also get frustrated and bored. because they feel like there's nothing they can do. They feel like they're running into a wall and nothing's happening. So there does need to be a sweet spot for these challenges that it looks interesting but still approachable. This is closer to the D&D model of the thinker, person who approaches challenges, as well as the Bartle's model of the explorer, because from Bartle's perspective, explorer is less about a geographic exploration and more about exploring the nuances of the system. So they want, from an explorer perspective of Bartle's theory, they want to play the game and find out what the problems are and resolve them. So in that respect, they're a lot like this Fixer model. And finally, there are the socialites. These are people who are primarily playing this big social game to be social and to make friends or to engage with their friends. And so them costuming, reasons people come over and talk to them, these are the things that are important, but whether it's inside the game world or outside of it is secondary. They're there primarily to be with people, to hang with people, and they will happily drop out of the game if they find that someone else's out-of-game conversation is more interesting. So if the game's going on, it's very tense, but people are still plotting and planning, and someone comes in and talks about the new job they got, they may maybe drop a character and go over and talk with their friend about this new interesting thing. And also, they may bend their character or make up a whole new character if they find some great new costume they think would be really, really exciting, or if they're just not getting the kind of socialization they want through their current existing character. This is generally unique to large-scale LARPs. They have a large model for socialization and a game structure in which socialization can exist outside of the game itself. In a tabletop game, usually the game and the socialization are synonymous, but the large-scale LARP does start to divorce a bit more. So this idea really comes up in those large-scale games where this kind of ad hoc socialization can really happen. Although the Bartle Socializer does probably come the closest. I want to call a special case, but it's assholes, because back to what we talked about earlier. Asshole is not a playstyle. And more specifically, I want to call out Cultivator, the one I showed earlier about mechanics, is also not an asshole. Cultivator is actually a viable playstyle. A lot of people can be any playstyle. The actor, the person who's really embellishing their character, who tells you this is how the game is played and you're doing it wrong, is just as much as an asshole as the guy who uses rock, paper, scissors or focuses on the dice to get your character killed. They're both assholes. It's not a viable playstyle. Imposing a playstyle or judging other people's playstyle is what assholes do. So it's not about what you like to have fun with, it's how that fun is expressed on other people and how they interact with you. And this is similar to MMO great versus internet trolls. These are people who, they don't care what you're doing, it's all about them getting that fix of attention. So there is a model for that, although it is a toxic model. And what's interesting is that this is not unique to live action games or even to gaming. On slideshare.net, there's actually this, it was done for consulting for companies, and it was called Assholes Are Killing Your Project. And it was actually a really interesting study that saw a lot of parallels to large-scale games, and actually gaming communities as a whole, which that's a long story, I'll get to that. But if you, as a player, feel like you're being belittled, impressed, humiliated, or de-energized by the interaction with someone else, you might be dealing with an asshole. And actually, there was a study done, and the study found that companies, corporations now, spend 3 times as much money tolerating assholes in their organization than they do simply firing them. 3 times. Now, for a primarily volunteer or hobby or thing like the large gaming community, that's not physical money, but that's emotional capital. And that's why we keep hearing stories about how I was playing and I burned out for a few years and I left because I kind of lost interest, usually because you're dealing with a lot of assholes who are not being excised from that community.
You know, as you're going through this, it's like, wow, that's hitting it right on the fucking money.
Right.
Shit.
So,
I'm thinking of my current Sunday game.
So exactly, and that's the thing is that brief digression, the 5 geek fallacies, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about that, but one of the geek fallacies is that we all have to be friends. That's one thing that we need to address, but this is, people with real money have found the same thing. It's not simply related to geeks. It's not a geek problem, it's not a nerd problem, it's not a gamer problem. This is a people problem. And consistently it's found time and again through sociological studies, through corporate studies, through anthropological corporate references, that it costs more to tolerate than it does to get rid of it. Yes, games are just happening the same way. Yes.
If I may, just out of curiosity, not that I don't love the word being used, but I'm just curious, in a corporate situation, what's the professional term?
Well, the slide share thing actually does use the term asshole because he felt that other terms were too obfuscating of the problem. A lot of times they'll use things like developmental problem or up-and-coming concern or human relationship drain, human relationship drain, things like that. And those obfuscate the bigger problem, which is that this sick person who is toxic to your environment. When I'm giving this presentation to people who aren't as tolerant of profanity, I use the word toxic as replacements.
Sure.
The thing is that this is, because there's not a clear non-profane term to identify this is why it's a big problem. Because when you start using words like asshole, people become very defensive. Well, I'm not an asshole, but no one thinks that they're an asshole. But the reality is that we've all been an asshole at times. It happens. But we don't have a really strong, clear term that doesn't have a kind of negative connotation. So he relied on asshole in his study. And I've been using it primarily because I think it is something that, especially with the kind of loose 18-plus culture that we generally have, it gets people's attention. Because like exact reaction is like, oh, that's really funny, and then you start hearing it, it's like, wait, no, I know that guy, I play with that guy, I'm only moving with that guy right now.
It's a shock factor, and it's doing as it's intended as a shock factor.
Which is why I still use the term right now. But for a corporate environment, they are trying to find a better term for, especially when your employment's on the line. No one wants to say, hey, we'll fire you because you're kind of a dick. You can't really do that, but so they're trying to find better ways of explaining that and what that drain means. But the slideshare presentation was really kind of a sociological present to say that, and again, this is also simply targeted for corporate projects. So it's like, move them off your project, move to different company kind of thing. So termination wasn't necessarily addressed. But from a game perspective, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that person's no longer welcome in our game. Game player around anymore. Because your toxic presence is causing problems for our game. Other people feel de-energized, they feel little, they feel like they can't play with you, they feel like they don't want to play anymore. And what's going to happen, and I've seen this time and time again anecdotally, is that that one guy or that one girl who keeps de-energizing people, more and more people are just going to find excuses not to show up. And you're going to lose 2, 3, 4, 5, multiples of people over that one person. And I actually have a whole other presentation going into a bit more of that, which I haven't fully fleshed out yet. But the key point of this that I want to take away is that this is all really, really important. None of this is related to a playstyle. Cultivators are not the exclusive person. Actors are not the exclusive person. That playstyle you don't like, or you don't really groove on, doesn't automatically make that person an asshole. Any playstyle can fall into this. Any playstyle can cause this problem. So that's a lot of great theory, wonderful profanity. But what does it all mean? It's great to have this kind of wonderful theory and analysis, but if you can't apply it directly to your game, it's meaningless. It's pointless. So I do have some actually ways you can apply this to your game, both as a player and as game master, to try to make your game better. First thing you do is determine what you like. And the easiest way to do that is to write down an honest list of the things that you like and don't like when you're playing your current game or games you've played in the past. And don't think of this as a list of judgments. Really, you want to think of your ideal game. If you had the perfect game, or the game where you had the most fun, what was it you really liked about it? What was it you really didn't like about it? And one of the things that I find time and again when I talk to you about this is that a lot of games usually have an implicit superior playstyle. And it's really hard to break out of that, but it's very important. Because if you play in a bunch of people who they thrive and talk about, oh, we role play all the time. We never pull the rule book out. We're always so focused on role play. They see that as a benefit because a lot of them play that way, but it implies, if you go, well, actually, I kind of like using the rules, you get embarrassed by that. You feel like, I should play this way because all my friends play this way. You can't do that for this stuff. You really need to focus on what you sincerely enjoy. And try not to pass judgment on yourself on what you like. Second one is the opposite. Find out what other people like. And as players, one thing to think about is because there's the kinds of scenes that happen around you. Like I mentioned earlier, lots of players talk really a whole lot about what they really enjoy the intensity of the role play and how their characters evolved and are involved in all this drama. Notice it seems like that player might be an actor. You try to see the kinds of scenes that happen around you during the game. What are people focusing on? What are they talking about? What are they gravitating to? What are they enjoying? As a game master, you have a little more option, obviously. You can poll your players, actually asking them a small questionnaire, using like SurveyMonkey, through email, through a list, or just pen and paper at games, or have an open meeting where again, you have everyone in and say, let's talk about what you guys are enjoying, what you're not enjoying, in a very non-judgmental way. I'll go a little bit more about how you get feedback, but as a game master, you can actually poll your players directly because you have a measure of authority and logistical respect in the game. Whereas players, you can still ask questions, but really you're doing it more ad hoc, one-on-one. What do you enjoy? Hey, you're my friend. What do you like to play? And again, look at what's there, not what you want to see or what the culture of your game feels like should be there. Because you may have started off 3 years ago with a game that really, really loved going and sculpting monsters, and now you may be at a point where you're really focused on the narratives of what it's like to live in a war-torn city. And you didn't realize over the course of time that you evolved this new place. So always look at what you're actually doing now, not what you think you should have been doing or what you've always been doing. And I mentioned going back to giving feedback. In my experience, how to get feedback, short, anonymous feedback is the best. If you ask someone to write 15-question essays, they're not going to do it. They're just going to check out because they're going to think in the back of their heads, I'm just doing this for fun. Why does this feel like work? So something, 3 quick questions. Ones I use a lot are, what's the most fun you've had recently? What's the least fun you've had recently? And is there anything else you want to tell me? And if you allow them the ability to make it anonymous, they'll also more likely give you honest feedback, which will skew to negative, but that's necessarily feedback you want, because that's something you can address. Also, don't wait for it. Go get it. If you're a game master, if you want this feedback, you have to ask for it, and preferably ask for it on a regular basis. Sometimes rewarding your players with experience points or other benefits is a good way of getting feedback. But no matter how you do it, you need to go ask them for it, and you have to keep asking them for it. To the point where they may be a little sick of you asking for it, but if you want to get this gauge, you have to get that information because it's very uncommon to talk about why you're having fun. Most people view fun very binary. I am having fun, or I am not having fun. I don't think about why they're having fun or what they're having fun with, so you have to constantly ask and engage them. You also have to make sure that this conversation is productive and not judgmental. Don't say, why aren't you having fun with this? That's judgmental. The player starts to feel like, well, obviously there's wrong with me because I'm not having fun with this thing that you think should be fun. Just saying, hey, I'm noticing you're not engaged, what can I do to help? Is there anything going on that I could do better? The more you make the conversation to a productive avenue of what can be done to make this better, and less about why aren't you doing X or why am I not doing X, because judgmental is game master is just bad. No one wants to say you're doing a shitty job as a game master. So move away from judgmental and more towards how can we solve this problem will get you better results. And similarly, get to action plans. The more you get the conversation to something that you can demonstrate and check off and physically show that you have done, the better your results are going to be. Because again, and I've certainly had hours talking to people like, we have this heavy art, actor game, and we do all this stuff, and it's wonderful. It's like, that's cool, and everyone walks away and nothing's happened. But if you say, okay, it looks like there's a lot of people who are really interested in cultivating, so let's go ahead and set up a plan. So next month we're going to introduce X amount of increased mechanic challenges, and we're going to see how that goes. Then we're going to quiz and engage people, see if they find it to be a better or worse improvements, and then we'll reassess that next month. Those are action plans, things you can check off and do, and show to yourself and to your other players that you've done something. And as a player, you can do this too. You certainly as a player say, hey, I'm noticing that I'm a leader in my community inside my game, and I'm noticing a lot of the people that I'm responsible for aren't having fun. How can I get them to show up more often? What can I do to help? Is there any way I can skew my character or talk to storytellers or game masters to try to make the game a little better for you? So as players, you can do this to a certain extent as well. And even internally, you can say, I'm going to show up next game, I'm going to do these 3 goals and see if that makes my game better. One size does not fit all. As I mentioned before, and it's very easy to do this, but these playstyles are general trends. They're not quote-unquote player classes. They're not, I am the actor, I'll always be the actor, I'm the hunter. That's not how this works. It's, right now, I'm having fun being an actor. And certainly people can fall in multiple categories. I'm an actor, but I kind of like cultivation a little bit. That's okay. Also, players evolve over time. So the needs of the game and the players must be regularly reassessed. When you start the game, you may have a good sense of what your players are, but as people age, as dynamics change, as more people get introduced into the mix, as people find new things, their interests and what they have to be fun will change as well. So it does need to be constantly reassessed. And also, never, never, ever assume what the player wants, because a lot of these playstyles can masquerade as other playstyles in certain situations. I'll actually have an example of that a little later on, But one thing to certainly keep in mind is that just because someone's playing a powerful character doesn't necessarily mean they're a cultivator. Just because someone's really artistic and emotional doesn't necessarily mean they're an actor. There's lots of ways that can look like other play styles, but don't necessarily assume just by a quick glance that you know exactly what they're interested in. And after you have all this information, you've assessed what you like, what other players like, you've gotten feedback, you've looked into this, try to identify the areas of conflict. If the players and the game masters don't really know how people are having fun, this is how playstyle conflicts result. It's easy to see in like tabletop games or in board games even. If you find someone who, for example, is Monopoly. Monopoly is a very long, tedious, badly designed game. But what seems to happen in a lot of Monopoly games is people start getting a little bored with it, start talking, and then it's that one person's turn, and spend 5 minutes talking about something like, take your turn, take your turn. The reality is they're no longer engaged in the play. They're now more interested in the social elements of it. Their play style has drifted during the course of that game. This is a very simple way to examine the larger problem, which is that people, if you don't know why people are there, if you don't know that the answer is put the Monopoly board away and let's just have a beer, then you're going to have conflicts. So that's one thing. That's where playstyle conflicts come from. A lack of understanding of why people are having fun, why they're there to begin with. Again, a playstyle is not wrong. Imposing your playstyles on others is wrong. And that's where a lot of the aggressive conflict comes from. Is, I'm not having fun. If these people just played the way that I have fun, everyone would have fun. So I'm going to tell them, force them to play the way that I have fun. So once you figure out, one way you can help to resolve conflicts is to help everyone get what they want. One thing you do is you can give up your own fun to help someone else have fun later. This goes into gift theory and a lot of sociology. In fact, a lot of social video games recently have gone a lot into giving and how giving can actually build bonds and make people have more fun. But one of the key things that's relevant, especially from a role-play live action element, is that if I give up some of my fun now, they're more likely to do the same for you in future, which means they're more likely to do stuff that will engage you down the road. So if you give up a little bit now, that does actually help you get more fun on the road. Everyone's generally having more fun that's aligned to their playstyle. I actually go a lot into this. I have another presentation called Playing to Lose, which I have on my website. It goes a lot more into the gift theory and to how this happens. But I will go into one concrete example, which I alluded to earlier, which is trading sacrifice. So obviously the best way to help is you want everyone to have fun with little to no sacrifice. Everyone's going along and helping each other out. Everyone's making sure that everyone else is having fun without really giving up what they like. But the reality is, as conflicts happen, people are in a position where they can give up a little bit of fun to help somebody else out. But one of the things I think that's interesting to note, especially with the gift theory I mentioned, is that it's found time and again that when you give something up, you actually draw communities closer. And there's a fantastic anecdote about this. Benjamin Franklin, when he was running for office, he's running for a local state office, and his opponent was rabidly against him. This may sound familiar, but he wrote these nasty attack ads in newspapers and was besmirching Benjamin Franklin's character and told him all these horrible things. Wasn't actually addressing the problems, but just lauded Benjamin Franklin's character. Benjamin Franklin wrote him a letter because this man was well known for having a large library, and said, "There's a book in your library that I've always wanted to read. Can I borrow it from you?" The gentleman, his opponent, felt a gentleman and said, "Of course, I will happily loan this to you." And the letter was terse, kind of accusatory, but generally didn't think the book came with it. And then a week later, Benjamin Franklin returned the book back, the very nice note saying, "Thank you very much, this was very helpful to me, I appreciate the loan." The attacks stopped after that. A week later, that opponent was in Benjamin Franklin's house having dinner with him. The reason why is because the man felt that he gave something meaningful, and it tied to his perception he was a benevolent person. And it's hard to be angry at someone that makes you feel like you're a benevolent, good person. So his attacks dropped. And Benjamin Franklin absolutely knew what he was doing. I doubt he even read the book, probably took it, set it on the shelf for a week, sent it back. But the point is, it brought those two men closer. And these are two bitter rivals. So when you give something up with no expectation of return, it's very likely that the community involved with that will become close together. It's been seen time and again. Again, look at Maslow's gift theory. There's a lot into this. So let me give you 2 examples of how this kind of sacrifice can actually happen in a game. So we have a cultivator, an actor, and a combat. This is almost the archetypal conflict of playstyles. You have the hard role players in a fight with the min-maxer, to use the negative terms. But the actor's playing a fairly badass character as well as the cultivator from an in-game perspective. The cultivator, given to his playstyle, naturally wants to demonstrate and prove his mechanical superiority. The actor wants to gain notoriety as being a dangerous character, but he actually doesn't really care if he wins. He's not here to prove his sheet is better. He's here to prove that his character that he's identifying and playing with is notorious and dangerous. So they compare sheets, and unsurprisingly, the cultivator's sheet is in fact more efficient, more superior, has been cultivated better, and shows a mechanical superiority. So they arbitrate. They say, we're not going to go through the mechanics. The actor says, absolutely, your sheet's awesome. There's no way I'm going to win this fight. So can we talk it out? And the actor's PC gets this disfigured scar. They decide that he has this huge scar across his face. The cultivator says, hey, I was such a badass that I was able to take him out. I was able to do this thing. The actor's character now still gets that notoriety. I was dangerous enough that I stood up to this powerful guy, and every day I had to show how dangerous I am because of the scar on my face. He gets what he ultimately wants. The cultivator gets what they ultimately want. Both of them give it up with a little bit of sacrifice. The cultivator gave up the actual joy of going through the mechanics. The actor gave up the ability to win that fight as a dangerous character, but it's very small to get what they actually wanted. A slightly larger form of sacrifice, again, very kind of archetypal situation is you have a fixer, someone that likes to solve problems, and a socialite, someone who likes to talk to people. They're in a large gathering of characters, and the NPC walks in to cause problems. And the NPC doing things, in the middle of the gathering, things are running. The game master asks the 2 players, what do you 2 want out of the situation? And the fixer actually wants to solve the problems that this NPC represents. The NPC is coming in to solve problems. I want to know what those problems are so I can go solve them. The socialite, however, sees an interesting NPC they want to engage with. They don't really care about the problems the NPC brings. The engagement could be yelling or telling them how they're a horrible threat to society, but they really want to just talk to that character and have some interesting discussions. So the NPC goes to talk to the socialite so the socialite can have that discussion, while the fixer can overhear and listen in on what's the conversation. And the fixer can then sneak off to actually solve the problem. Now again, in both cases, they're going to have a little bit more. The socialite's kind of agreeing to not deal with the problem. They're basically, I'm going to stay here and talk and then distract him for a while. So the socialite's there doing primarily what the socialite likes, which is talking and having a social conversation. But they're giving up the chance to actually solve that problem. The fixer can't ask all the exact questions the fixer wants to figure out what that problem actually is, but they get to deal with the problem. They get to find a problem and deal with it. So they're getting larger chunks of what could actually be fun, but they're focusing on what's actually fun for them. So that's it. As I mentioned before, I do have a bunch of stuff on my websites. I have recordings of this presentation and the slides from this presentation, as well as some other ones like I mentioned earlier, Playing to Lose. But with that, do you guys have any questions or things I can expound on that I didn't go over in this?
You're pretty thorough.
I have done this a few times.
So I missed the intro. Was there something where you were talking about why you started studying this so analytically as opposed to just thinking about it?
Well, that's actually a good question. I didn't go into detail, but I am a game designer by trade. I have been working on role-playing games and LARPs and video games for 14 years now. So part of it was just from a purely professional standpoint is I have to kind of understand how players have fun. But part of it, which actually I didn't go into this version of the presentation, is there really isn't, until extremely recently, any kind of studies on how large-scale live-action games work. Past few years, there's a group, I can't pronounce the name unfortunately, but it's a Nordic convention that is nothing but LARP theory. People go into presentations, and they've actually started putting English versions of their presentation on YouTube called Nordic LARP, or Nordic Talks. I have to look it up real quick. So they're starting to do some studies, but even then they're focusing on slightly different things because their style of Nordic LARP is different from our style of salon LARP. So I still felt like there's this gap of understanding why players have fun in order to make sure they have more of that. So that's what this kind of all started, and I realized that this wasn't something that could easily be kind of put into a book and given in people's hands because it's a bunch of theory on the page, and it's not really something that directly relates to rules. It's about how players interact with each other and how game masters interact with those players. So it's really much more about sociology, which is why I decided to turn this into a talk and start going to other conventions to talk about it, because it's about people. It's about how you play the game, thinking critically about why you play the game and how the game works, and making sure that it can be adapted and modified so people can actually have the most amount of fun. I've heard a number of people very polite tell me that they've used this at their games and they've seen improvements. There's one game in Chicago, they said that they were on the verge of collapse. They saw my talk and they said they grew to almost twice as many people for 2 years afterwards, which is very, very flattering to me. But at the end of the day, it comes down to these are just tools. We didn't have a tool set to be able to actually understand problems inside them. So that's why I started doing this. Yes?
Alright, now at the Sunday LARP that I go to a Vampire the Masquerade LARP every Sunday for the most part. There's a bit of an issue where certain people, no matter what, tend to role play with the same people. It's a fairly large LARP.
It's very cliquish.
Yeah.
80 to 110 players.
Wow. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty
I'm
big.
jealous.
So it's very clique-like, and so even, because I used to play Toreador, and then I skipped to something completely different. I'm now in Bruja.
Right.
And I just thought that would get me interacting with more people and different groups of people, and it turns out that, you know, I may be part of the Bruja, but the people who played them still talk to the same people.
Right.
And I'm just I'm only talked to when I'm needed.
Right.
And I'm not the only one who's like that. It's, you know, people have their cliques, they have their people they hang around. What do you do about that?
That's a slightly harder question, primarily because that really ties to a certain extent a variation on social life. I mean, some people that they really find enjoyable is to hang out with their specific friends. One thing that I would possibly do to address that, comes to talking about specifically how can you increase things, is going to those players and saying, what can I do to help your game? What can I do to help you out? And it's not universal. Some people will go, oh no, just, or they'll give you some vague answers that don't really help you with anything. My wife, watch yourself out. I've noticed this myself. I mean, I think it's not uncommon in live action games is that people can actually gravitate towards their comfort zone. And I've reached out to other people and say, hey, it looks like we're playing X together, we're in the same clan together, we're in the same group together. What can I do to make your game better? What can I do to help? Is there anything I can bring in my background? Is there something I can bring to games? Is there, you know, some way that I can bring out a piece of your backstory? You know, can I be your +1 in challenges? Something to help you out to be more involved. And showing that kind of interest on an out-of-game level sometimes breaks through. And if you can get through to 1 or 2 people in that clique, then usually the rest will start to warm up at that point in time, because then you're drawn to that clique. And then so the secret is that if you break it to 1 or 2 people in all of the cliques, eventually they're not going to realize that they're actually role-playing with each other, but it's going to slowly happen. But it certainly is not a simple, hey, you must do X, Y, and Z. Because we're talking about sociology, we're talking about people dynamics. People generally trying to cluster to groups about, I forget the actual theory off the top of my head, but there's a theory that people, after certain points, it's harder for them to relate to other people. And so people actually subdivide into smaller communities. That's why if you go to a university, people naturally divide by classes, they subdivide by discipline, they subdivide inside of that, and then eventually you find that, you know, increasingness of people who are engaged with each other. You can see some more example if you look at punk rock subcultures. They become extremely specific because, you know, you have a cultural identity rebellion, so naturally I have to show that I'm more rebellious than the other dude. And so you get things like, and I've been serious about this, Celtic fusion, German, hardcore, Christian punk is an actual genre.
You know,
So, and there's like 2 bands, and they hate each other. But the point is that people tend to be smaller groups, so I mean, the more that you can kind of help to be the bridge between those smaller communities, the more you get an integrated game. But it is against the grain for human culture, so it's not something you can easily do. Does that answer your question?
yeah, it answers it.
So, yep.
Yes.
From an academic standpoint, my background is in mathematics and statistics. So I look at studies and I'm like, how do you quantify fun?
So I have a short and a long answer for you. The short answer is you don't. And game designers are furious about that. The long answer, however, is that there have been some attempts to try to do that. There is a book called by Ralph Kostner called A Theory of Fun. And he actually put a 10-year anniversary version of the book out last year, I think. And he's a guy who worked on Ultima Online. And he's been around for a number of years, a fantastic game designer. He's actually the one that turned me into the Maslow's gift theory. And he made an attempt to try to quantify fun. People have,
I suppose
some
somebody
people
had to.
worship at the book, other people think that he's an outright hack, which is natural, this kind of thing. And he even admits that he's not entirely sure in some of his own things, and in the 10th anniversary he tries to revise and adapt it. But the reality is that the example I give to a lot of people is that trying to quantify fun is a lot of trying to quantify love. It means so many things to so many different people. All you can hope to do is try to focus on engagement. And a lot of game design theory is moving less from fun and more for engagement. I think to a detriment, because now you see things like Farmville, which is really, really engaging, but I would hesitate to say anyone finds it actually fun. It's like a job that pays you with shitty Facebook clicks. But it's really engaging, and so we slide away from the emotional component of fun into engagement, there's that loss there. So there's a lot that's going on in the game design community right now, and I don't think we're ever going to come to an answer. The only thing we can do, and live action is actually uniquely positioned to be able to address this, is that because we're talking about an art form that requires communication and requires collaboration to be existent, let alone successful, you can meaningfully ask players to take up the burden of analysis. In a video game, I can't do that. If I make Call of Duty 17 and it's tanks, I can't ask the players, well, why did you have this fun? What kind of fun are you looking for? No, all I'm going to see is sales went up, sales went down, you're fired. That's what's going to happen. Because there's not a conversation with the players that's meaningful. You certainly read communities and talk, especially MMO communities, you read forums and the like, and certainly you get a lot of opinions about why your game was fun, especially if you search for the word nerf. But the downside is that it's not really a conversation so much as taking on feedback, as it were. And you can't meaningfully adjust because it's pure logistics. I can't code and get art assets and test and QA and get it out the door at a speed, whereas in a live action game, I can right now change my character. I can say, okay, my character, back in the head, I can change, adjust a piece of my character's backstory and spin it out in a different way to make sure the player right in front of me is having fun now. As a storyteller, I can drop the plot I wrote, pick up something else out of my ass, throw it in gameplay, and fun is now occurring in a different way. So, this is really interesting. The reason why I think, more to your point, why I think live action from a, not just from a LARPer perspective, from a game design perspective is interesting, is because of the fact that you have a very, very small feedback loop between designer in this case, which is game master to some respect, and player. It's very, very small and almost invisible. Tabletop games only they come remotely close, and the scale of it is different because in the tabletop game usually it's either 6 strangers at a convention that you play with 3 hours and never play with again, or it's the same group of people you generally know on a social level, and there's not really that much of a divide between my friends that I've known for years and my friends that I game with. In a live action game you have this difference. So it's a very long way to explain that there isn't an answer to it, but it doesn't mean that there's an attempt to try to make it happen, and there's a lot of thought as to how we can do that. Yes?
As I said earlier, before everybody showed up, I played a long time ago when I was in high school, which was 2006 for me. Yeah, I'm dating myself.
Don't. Yours race. You can go right now.
But as I said, I got out of it for a few years, and I'm slowly starting to pick back up into it, but I haven't started actively playing in a Chronicle and going to weekly games and sessions. But what would you recommend for a player who had the bad experience and is trying to get back into it? Like, how would you recommend they approach the game, especially tying into the various play styles and everything?
The first thing I would do is focus on what you enjoy. First step is find out what you like. if you had a bad experience, I would certainly look into these things I didn't enjoy. Take that list to the game and talk to the game master and key players and say, this is what I didn't enjoy. I would like to play in your game, I would like to have fun at your game. Is there a way that either these problems can be addressed, or is there a way that you can help me to overcome them? And again, try and be judgmental, because don't say, if this should happen,
Well,
quit it. And that's not gonna happen.
luckily for me, the Chronicle that I used to play in, it doesn't exist anymore.
Right, but if you're going to a random group of people, or even people used to from a different environment now, just say, hey guys, last time I played, as a random example, last time I played, I really didn't get into the long 4-hour combats. I know live action prone to that. Is there going to be a lot of combat in this game? And if there is there ways that either I can opt out of it, or if I can roleplay during the combat, or make a second character, or is there an alternative I can do to, because I find that I don't like this style of play. And I don't think that's necessarily limited to just coming in from a long time, because a perfect example of this, I actually quit my game for about 6 weeks after my layoffs. And I spent a lot of time going, hey, I've been playing the same way for about 2 years now. I was increasingly not having fun. So I took some time off while I was doing my job search. It's like, why am I playing this game? So I'm just now in the process of coming back to that game. And I come back and say, hey guys, the stuff I told you 2 years ago that I like to play isn't true anymore. Sorry about that. Here's what I'm thinking now that I'd like to play. I'd like to try out. I'm going to have to make a new character to make it happen. Are you guys on board with me trying this, or is it going to cause some serious problems for you? And a couple of people are like, well, actually, it's going to cause some problems for me, and we've been able to talk that out, but it's a conversation.
Right.
I can say, you know, and they know going into it, I'm in a different place than I was before. This is what I want to see out of the game. This is what was bothering me. How can we minimize that? But I mean, a certain amount of this, because again, it's collaborative, you're not going to eliminate everything that bothers you. There's going to be some stuff that sucks that you don't like. But it comes down to, is the percentage of fun higher than the percentage of suck? And is there a way that, how much of that can you do, and how much of that can other players help you out with? And again, especially if they say, you know, hey, I don't really like large combats either, you know, maybe we can work on that, and then talk to players, and you know, it turns out most of the game hates that. And they just are so used to it, they didn't realize they couldn't stop having fights. They're addicted to large fights, it happens. And so, having conversations is always, I feel, the first step in any of these project concerns. But certainly if you come back for a long time, try to come in with your list of bullet points of things that you would like to diminish or increase, and find your best way to maximize those, and have a conversation that doesn't involve saying, these things need to stop, or these things need to happen.
Okay.
Do I have time for one more quick question? Or zero? I have time. Oh, yeah, one back here.
I know that you said asshole is not a type of gamer, but...
Yes. No, I said asshole about play style.
Right, sorry.
It is absolutely a type of gamer.
What play style do you think that if an asshole falls into that play style is the hardest to kind of weed out or get rid of if you're playing a game?
Actor. Let me step back. The official answer is they're all equally toxic, yada yada. But I'm trying actor because, given the live action role playing, role playing in the title, there is this cultural idea that role playing is sometimes superior, and I think I really hate. There's this clever little fucking thing, like role playing, not rules playing. I hate that with a passion, because rules are necessary to make sure the game is cohesive. But because there's this entrenched cultural thing that the role play is a superior way of approaching a problem than through following the rules, it's harder to excise a toxic version of that. That being said, getting someone a toxic personality of your game as a whole is generally hard to do anyway. So I would focus less on which one's harder, but it's more, that was usually hard to diagnose because everyone kind of, oh, he's playing his character. How many times have you heard that? But I'm just playing my character.
All the time.
That was...
Because I am.
That was one of the breaking points, actually, because every time I did try to go and approach a problem, I got the typical response of, oh, well, that's just me playing my character, and oh, that's just you playing your character.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not the character I had in mind, that's not the way I intended to play this character.
Right, but see,
You pretty much not even storyline, but just more or less by nature of the game itself forced me into...
Right, because the problem in that conversation right there, a perfect example of that is, your response was, well, that's not my character's supposed to be. You've immediately moved to his avenue, his playstyle. No matter where the conversation goes, you can see if his playstyle is superior, and the conversation is now over for you. Because if you don't like playing an active playstyle, then the rest of the conversation is going to be, well, this is why the actor's playstyle is superior, and therefore my interpretation of it is also superior. So the way to move away from, it's not, well, that's not what a character's supposed to be, along the lines of, that being what it is, your
Right.
character's an asshole, I'm not having fun with that asshole character being in my game because of these reasons that are relevant to my playstyle. So, anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.